And there we go. Janelle, the floor is yours. Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you, Amy. So I'll start by going through today's agenda. Thanks for the nice introductions, and we'll just go through again and briefly introduce ourselves and welcome you all. Then we'll have a brief program of study overview. We'll talk about program of study development, and then we'll go into program of study approval application formatting tips, and then we will wrap up. So again, I'm Janelle Jones, Director for Career and Technical Education at the Illinois Community College Board. And as we're coming in, please introduce yourselves as well in the chat.
I'm Deja Luckett. I am the Associate Director for Career and Technical Education.
And I'm Ann Story, Associate Director for Career and Technical Education.
All right, so we would like to welcome you to our presentation today. So for a little bit of background, our CTE team facilitated a 10-week program of study approval cohort earlier this year, where we walked through the Illinois Program of Study Expectations tool to kind of break down the components of program of study. And that was to get everyone prepared to submit their programs of study for approval. We recognize that not everyone here has attended that cohort, but we hope that you can still find something meaningful just about the quality components of a program of study in Illinois, and then some of our approval processes. So again, this presentation is intended to be a follow-up to that cohort, and we're going to be reviewing the quality components as well as offering tips for the approval process and just program of study development and improvement in general. And our tips are kind of based on the applications that we have received so far. And so some of you have already submitted some of your programs of study for approval. Some of you have received feedback and some of you have not. So for those, I know it'll come up. So if you haven't received feedback, we are working on reviewing the applications that we have received so far. So just hang in there for your feedback. And we can go to the next slide. So how did we get here? In order for CTE programs of study to be funded with federal Perkins funds, programs of study must meet or be working towards the state's definition of size, scope, and quality in order to be deemed a program of study. And so this means that programs of study can be funded for 2 years as you work towards developing them and meeting the definition. But prior to the 3rd year, in order to continue utilizing Perkins funds, programs of study must meet all quality components of a program of study and be submitted to and approved by ICCB. And next slide, please. So before we get too far, what even is a program of study? So a program of study is a coordinated, non-duplicative sequence of academic and technical content at the secondary and post-secondary level that incorporates challenging state academic standards, addresses both academic and technical knowledge and skills, is aligned with the needs of industry and the economy of the state, region, tribal community, or local area, progresses in specificity. So it starts broadly within an industry or career cluster, and then it drills down into instruction that is specific to an occupation. It also has multiple entry and exit points, and it culminates in the attainment of a recognized post-secondary credential. And so now we're going to get into the 9 quality components of a program of study. And I'm going to be taking the first few quality components, and the approach that I'm going to take is to give you an overview of the component, like a brief overview, and then I'm going to give tips to either help you as you develop and or improve your program of study, and then also just general tips for the application process. So the first quality component, or quality component 1, is development and engagement. So programs of study must be developed through secondary and post-secondary collaboration They must respond to the analysis and findings of the CLNA with a comprehensive local needs assessment. They must be informed by external stakeholders, and they must have an advisory committee, which must meet at least annually. The advisory committee must also review labor market information, provide input on current industry practices, identify high skill, high wage, and in-demand occupations and related competencies within the region, consider long-term industry and future of work, and they must participate in the continuous improvement process. And so some program and study approval tips are, and this session is being recorded. So we want to make sure that you're continuously engaging your external stakeholders. So we understand that you may have a lot of individuals from the college that are participating on advisory committees, but just make sure that external stakeholders are included as well. And as far as the application process, when you submit your evidence for this quality component, if you're sending in a list of your advisory committee, just make sure that you clearly identify the secondary partners. So, and also, I think that I found that, you may have some individuals who work for your institution, but maybe you're maybe looking at them like they work for a company as well. And so just make sure if you're counting them as external stakeholders, if you put that they are an employee of your institution, we're not really thinking of them as external. So just make sure you clearly point out what stakeholders are external and what stakeholders are secondary. The expectation tool also states that published mission, vision, and goals are acceptable supporting materials, and they are, but we want to see these as they're related to your program of study or to the advisory committee. You can go back one. So we do value the overall college's mission, vision, and goals, and that's fine if you do use that as your evidence, but just make sure that you clearly demonstrate how we can see your mission, your college's mission, vision, goals in action in the program of study. Next slide, please. So quality component 2 is employer-informed competencies and skills. So instruction must be aligned with employer-informed technical and essential employability competencies conducive to high skill, high wage, and in-demand occupations. So some program of study approval tips that we have for you. I know we've had the question, do these competencies, do the employer-informed competencies have to come from local employers? And the answer is no. Yeah, they certainly can, but they don't have to only come from local. And so these competencies can include competencies identified by local employers, accrediting bodies, national organizations, and also the state of Illinois model programs and study guides list out competencies as well. So, as long as they're identified for this area, you can use those competencies. They don't only need to be local. And then we also want to make sure that you consider the Illinois Essential Employability Skills Framework as a resource for identifying your essential employability competencies. That's a great tool to use. And so as far as your evidence in this, for this quality component, so it's nice for you to let us know what the competencies and skills are, but we want to see how they're actually incorporated into your curriculum. And so send us a syllabus. Like you can send us a list of the skills if you see fit, but also give us a syllabus or a lesson plan or something that demonstrates exactly how we can see these skills and competencies within the program of study. Next slide, please. All right, so the next quality component 3 is instructional sequence. So programs of study must provide a non-duplicative, fully articulated sequence of courses from secondary through post-secondary. So the tips here are in order to be considered a program of study, there must be a secondary to post-secondary linkage. So that's the only way that you can be considered a program of study. So dual credit is recommended. However, articulated high school courses or advanced placement courses are acceptable if dual credit opportunities cannot be made available. And as far as your application materials, we just ask that if you're going to be sending in a course sequence documentation, which is what I think the approval form asks for, just like a sequence of your courses, please identify which courses are dual credit, because otherwise there's no way that we would know. And we also want you to list the participating high schools. So quality component 4 is work-based learning. So at minimum, each of the following must be included in order to be a program of study. So you have to include a team-based challenge and or a career and technical student organization or CTSO. So you have to either have a team-based challenge or a CTSO, and you have to include one or more of the following at both the secondary and post-secondary levels. So there's a continuum of work-based learning opportunities that occur from secondary through post-secondary. And so again, so one of the following, the internship, career-related services, all of those, you just need to have one of those, but you also have to have at least a team-based challenge or a CTSO. In the next couple of slides, we have the definitions, and you don't have to go there just yet, but we do have the definitions for all of these work-based learning activities. But here for our evidence, we want to make sure that you provide evidence for, for our approval tips. Please provide evidence for both the team-based challenge or CTSO and or the work-based learning activities. So because there's multiple components, we want to make sure that you remember that we need evidence for both of them. And so a key point here to remember is that we're talking about the program of study, not individual students. So while we hope that as many students as possible can take advantage of these work-based learning opportunities to enhance their experiences and prepare for their careers, like if you're using, say, a CTSO to meet the requirement, we know that not every single student is going to be able to participate in a CTSO, but it has to still be part of your program of study and available for the students to participate in if they're able. So I know some people think, well, you know, I have students who are adults with families and they can't, you know, participate in a CTSO, or my student works, they can't complete an internship. So not everyone has to, they just have to, it has to be available within the program of study. And we're looking for it to be intentional. So it's okay that you're, you know, you might have internships available at the college, like any student can take, but we want to make sure that it's a part of the curriculum and it's available within the program of study. So I want to go a little, I'm not going to go into every single one of the definitions, but I will talk about team-based challenges and career and technical organization. So you can go to the next slide. So a team-based challenge is a group-based learning project relating to an individual's career area of interest that involves a problem related to employers within that area, including mentoring from adults with expertise in that area, and requires an individual to present the outcomes of the project. And so I think there's, you know, some, I don't want to say confusion, but I think people often think of team-based challenges as only occurring in a competition, but that's not necessarily the case. So they can occur, they can be, you know, competitive in nature, they can be part of a CTSO, but they don't have to be. This could be in any course where students are working as a team, you know, on a group project, and then they do a presentation at the end. IWIN, the Illinois Work-Based Learning Initiative Network, has a lot of great resources. And they're out of Education Systems Center or Ed Systems at NIU. They have a lot of great resources on work-based learning in general and also team-based challenges. So, and then we'll talk about career and technical student organizations. So this definition is from Perkins, and I won't read it all, but just note that there are 8 nationally recognized CTSOs that are authorized by Perkins. And these are the organizations that can be funded using Perkins funds. So I think the key thing to remember here is that they just provide an opportunity for students enrolled in career and technical education to engage in career and technical education activities. And also, this is a great opportunity that I would note for partnership with your secondary partners, because they often have active chapters of various CTSOs on their high school campuses. So we can go to the next slide. I'm sorry. So the next couple slides do have the definitions, and so we can skip through that one, and we have a pause coming up. So, and all these slides will be made available. So, and also, as we said, we are recording. So, pause for collaboration. Can we have some folks unmute, put in a chat? We just want to know, how have your CTSOs remained active during the pandemic when in-person engagement has been limited? Virtual competitions. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of virtual. I know on the secondary side, I live in Decatur, and I saw a lot of activity with the FFA here, where they attended a conference over in Bloomington, and they participated at our farm progress show. I saw that they were like selling corn at one point. They have a farm that they farm. And so, yeah. So lots of activities. Okay, so I'm going to, if we're done, I'll kick it over to Anne, and I will try to catch up and answer some of the questions in the chat.
All right, thanks, Janelle. So I'm going to cover the remainder of the quality components and continue with kind of some tips or suggestions that we have for you as you complete your or work on your program of study approval applications. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, so quality component 5, as you know, is recruitment and access. And your program of study must ensure access is equitable and all students are able to receive supports to persist and succeed in their CTE courses. So there are 2 questions that you can consider as you begin to assess your program of study. The first is, how are your students recruited into your program? Take a look at your materials. Are they inclusive? Are you kind of presenting a diverse student body? Are your recruitment and outreach strategies equitable? Second question is, do all students have equitable access to my program? So, kind of step outside the box and ask yourself, are students consciously or unconsciously steered into or away from my program? Take a look at your wraparound services and decide whether or not the services are equitably available to all students. You can go to the next slide. So a few places that you can review to assess the strengths and weaknesses of your programs are your CLNA. You can take a look at section 1, progress toward equity and access, and section 6, where you analyze the program size, scope, and quality. You can also take a look at your statewide program review. You can look at the CTE review template. You've got section 1, which is need. And within that section, you can look at 1.4. You can look at section 3, which is quality. And within that section, you can look at 3.17, performance and equity data mining. You can look at your student and academic support services review, and just keep in mind that this is done on a rotating schedule. And you can also take a look at the special population super strategy documents that we've linked within this presentation. Next slide. So if you're looking or struggling to decide what to send to us as evidence, we've given you a few examples below. You can submit, again, your dual credit offerings. You can submit your new student orientation materials. You can submit any like open house information that you have. If your school hosts a career day, you can send us an agenda or any information that, on how you advertise that career day to students. You can also include contacts for different offices, including but not limited to financial aid, health services, career services. So quality component 6 is academic instruction and supports, and you need to keep in mind that your program of study must include challenging academic instruction and also wraparound services that facilitate successful student progression. So you want to take a look, assess your academic instruction and supports by determining whether or not you provide wraparound services to underserved, underrepresented, and special population students. Are the support services appropriate to promote student success? Are they universally designed to promote success? Do your students have access to networks of resources? And last but not least, do your services reflect your learners and their families' interests? So some examples of evidence or supporting materials you can include in your application are, again, contacts for student support offices like health services, financial aid, counseling, career services. You can send us a list of student clubs and organizations. You can send enrollment and completion data. You can send your program's goals and objectives. You can also send us a list of equipment and technology. Quality component 7 is where you're going to assess your instructors. So you want to make sure that any of the instructors in your programs of study, that they're collaborating with industry professionals, they're engaging in professional learning, and they're meeting specific qualifications. So these criteria include that they participate in externship programs and that your instructor has 2,000 hours of work experience and appropriate recognizable credentials. So examples of supporting materials, you can send us conference agendas. You can send us, maybe a job ad where you're listing faculty qualifications. You can send descriptions of any professional development that your faculty have attended. And you can also send us sections of your CLNA. So for your CLNA, you'd be looking probably at section 3, where recruitment, retention, and training of CTE educators. And you might also take a look through your program review, specifically section 3, quality, where you're looking 3.18 and 3.19. You're addressing instructors and externships and professional development. All right, in quality component 8, you are analyzing your facilities and equipment. So you need to keep in mind that your programs of study have to be offered in facilities that are accessible and that also use industry standard technology and equipment. So how can you properly assess your facilities equipment? You can look at your CLNA section 6, where you discuss program size, scope, and quality. Again, you can look at your statewide program review, your CTE review template, section 3, is quality, and you'd be looking at 3.3, 3.16, and 3.22, and 3.23, and also the performance and equity data mining section. You can look at Title II of the 2010 ADA and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1974. And finally, you can also take a look at your civil rights assessment. Some examples of supporting materials you can send, can take a look at your advisory council minutes, a list of advisory council members, a list of equipment and technology, and any applicable training completed by your instructors. And finally, in quality component 9, you are assessing for continuous improvement. So keep in mind, your programs of study have to be continually evaluated and improved upon. And you're doing this in collaboration with your stakeholders and your advisory committees. So how do you properly assess for continuous improvement? It's important to remember you need to use multiple forms of assessment and measurement. You need to use data, and you need to use data to inform a culture of program improvements, to foster local improvement and regional development, and to inform program development and implementation with labor market data. You also want to make sure that you have a data collection system that is able to collect longitudinal data, that will collect reliable and valid data at each educational level, that provides disaggregated and cohort-based data gap analysis in different groups, and that assists partnerships to set specific performance targets that will establish measurable goals. So examples of supporting materials, you've got your program learning outcomes. Again, you can refer back to your CLNA, take a look at section 2, student performance, where you talk section 5, labor market alignment, and section 6, program size, scope, and quality. A list of advisory council members, and also your program review. If you look at section 3, quality, you can look at 3.26 through 3.31 as evidence. Next slide. So we're going to pause again for another moment of collaboration. And what we want to know is, how is your college using the continuous improvement process to assess equity within your programs of study? So feel free to unmute, feel free to type in the chat, and we'll just take a minute to share with each other.
You all should be able to unmute yourselves. And again, feel free to type in the chat.
Do you remember which quality component, Yolanda?
That was on the last slide that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
Examples of materials. I was trying to type really fast.
3.26 and 3.31.
3.1. Thanks, Anne.
Or through 3.31. You have all of those that would be helpful. Could be helpful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Patty. Patty says at JJC, they do an annual process based on our program review, and it motivates them to disaggregate data. And which school are you at? Is it Tierney? Shawnee is using it to address student barriers and staff barriers. That's good. Thank you. Okay, if we have A school only does the program review cycle as continuing improvement. Will that pass the approval process? Now, you mean if you include it as evidence, Patty?
I guess what I'm thinking is, so at Joliet, we do annually this program review, basically.
Mhm.
But if a school really only does program review on the program review cycle, and that's pretty much what they use as continuous improvement at their institution, is that enough to pass the program of study approval process? Or are you guys looking for something in addition to that?
Oh, so I couldn't get to the unmute, but as long as you can just explain, and as long as it is reviewing the program of study, and you can, link that, and as long as you provide evidence, yeah, we can accept it. As long as you're, making the dots connect for us to understand exactly how this is continuous improvement for the program of study, it will be
Great,
accepted.
thank you.
Well, and then Janelle, also, this is Arlene from College of Lake County. So would you also consider the comprehensive local needs assessment plan? Because like in that case, like if we do surveys of students, and of course, for the surveys of students, we will also ask demographic questions or special populations type of questions as part of the comprehensive local needs assessment, which should be done, I believe, in 2022, because like it's every 2 years that it's updated. Would that be would you consider that as part of the continuous improvement?
Yeah,
process?
as long as you can link it and demonstrate how, how it's being used, and we can clearly understand and see that, you are actually using this to assess the program of study, yes, that would be acceptable.
Okay,
So,
all right, thank you.
Arlene, I think you also talk about or you can in your program review talk about student surveys and stuff like that too. So you might look in the quality section of that as well.
Yeah, but the program review, you see, it's on a 5-year cycle. So some of our program of study that we're actually submitting applications for, they were reviewed 3, 4, 5 years ago, and it's irrelevant now. So yeah.
Yeah, as long as we can see that you're using that data to improve your program, that's what we're looking for.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And
sorry, Janelle, go ahead.
We're going to get into what Gina, we will answer this question in the next part. So Deja's going to be talking a lot about that portion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if you don't have any more questions, we can pass it on to Deja, right?
I have one more slide.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
So we get a lot of questions about how the model programs of study relate to this process. And so these were developed as guidance for local colleges to adopt or customize in partnership. As Systems leads this work through NIU. So the key thing to remember is that these are exemplars. And so you might not be able to fully adopt the models at your institution, but we highly encourage you to read through them and see what you can use. So maybe it's just the methodology, the approach that Ed Systems facilitated to develop the models. So maybe you can take that approach and use it, to kind of scale down a local model that you can use across your college's programs of study, because we know that there are going to be several different individuals working, on this work. And so these are guides, they're exemplars. And so, like I said, we recognize that some places may not be able to implement them in whole, but they're definitely awesome tools, and we highly encourage you to read them. And also, I plug that Ed Systems is hosting a webinar series around the models. And so highly encourage you to attend just to learn more about how you can use the models and to check out their website, because there's a lot of great resources. And now we can go.
All right, to end off this presentation, we are going to talk about the program of study approval application tips. So as applications are rolling in, we compiled a list of things that you should be aware of as you are turning in these applications. And yeah, next slide. So for the application tips, first, you need to consider including an appendix or a guide to easily identify the evidence. I know this is typically for people that are using all their evidence in one document, but still try to make the evidence identifiable as possible. The evidence should just be straightforward. Reiterate points to make it easier to identify the evidence. So for instance, if the same piece of evidence or information is shared in multiple components, repeat that information. So it's fine to, if you have to reiterate something in another component, that is totally fine. We just don't want to have to search for your evidence, or you can reference it as well. Make sure links are included in your documents and they aren't broken. There have been links that have not worked. So just be sure that your links work before you're submitting the application. Check the size of the document before submitting it. So there's been a couple of institutions that have submitted applications that were pretty big. So just know that that might be an issue and don't like freak out. We'll work with you to make sure that all of your stuff is sent in, and consider other options such as sending it in a zip drive or dividing the applications into multiple emails. And once again, we will work with you. Next slide. So ensure that links go directly to the web page referred to the evidence. So if you have a link and if it goes just to your main page on the college, that's not cool. Make sure those links are directly to your evidence, so we will know exactly where we're trying to look. If you send the entire CLNA or program review document as evidence for a quality component, make sure the applicable sections are highlighted. So I know Ann just went through different parts of the section that you need to use as evidence, but please do not send your entire CLNA and it's not highlighted and we don't know what evidence that you're trying to convey. Utilize the Illinois Program of Study Expectation Tool to help prepare the application. This tool was made for you guys so you can know exactly what we're looking for as far as evidence and as far as like what we're looking for as a complete component. So this is a very helpful tool. It also helps me to grade, so I know it'll help you. If a quality component has multiple parts, be sure to provide a narrative responses and evidence for each. So what that basically means is some of the questions will have multiple parts, like, okay, 2 to 3 questions. Make sure you're answering all the questions and having all the evidence for the questions that's being asked. Yep. So we're going to go through an example of what it looks like to have a cohesive way to refer to evidence. And thank you, Patty, for letting us use your school as an example. So for instance, we have recruitment and access as one of the components, and you see they have their information down, very brief, but then at the bottom you see highlighted see Appendix 5. Go to the next one, please. Right. All right, so we add Appendix 5. You see this is recruitment and access, and is, yeah, go to the next slide. Sorry. So we're at Appendix 5, and you see at the bottom that they have page 4, dual credit offerings. We know what exactly to expect when we're looking through your application. So let's say we're going to dual credit offerings on page 4. Next slide. So you see there's a brief description of exactly what we're trying to get at. It don't have to be this long, but we want to know that we're looking at dual credit offerings. And they have the courses and they also have the high schools. So this is very important to identify these things when we're looking through your application. Next slide. So these are general reminders. So all 9 quality components must be met before submitting the program of study application. So they have to be complete, not developing. They have to be met by the time you send in the application. Applications are due by June 1st, 2022 for programs of study that utilize Perkins funds during fiscal year 21 and 22 in order to use Perkins funds 23. So let me clear that up. So if you use funds in 2022, applications are due by June 1st, 2022. So you can utilize your funds in 23. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so applications may be submitted anytime prior to June 1st, 2022. So you don't have to wait the month before. You can turn in applications anytime before that. We have applications now, as we stated. Allow a minimum of 2 weeks for feedback and approval. So depending on the volume of the submissions, approval could take longer. So allow us 2 weeks to before we give you the application feedback. And it could take longer depending on how much we have and what's going on. So if you will be submitting multiple applications for approval, consider sending applications as they are completed rather than waiting until all are finished. Yeah, so we suggest that you, if you have an application that's already done, just sit it in, because this will ensure that, you know, we can give you feedback in probably a maybe a reasonable time, and then also you would know what things you should work on your next programs. The next one is one benefit to submitting early is receiving feedback and applying that feedback to your future applications.
And I would note that we forgot to add where to submit. So I'm going to put that in the chat. We do have a program of study approval inbox that you can submit them, your applications to. And you can feel free to copy your CTE liaison. They're going to get it either way because we have access. We all have access to this inbox. And another thing that I wanted to note was that the examples that Deja used were just examples. So we're not saying that your application has to look exactly like Joliet's, but it was just kind of like a good example of, and we have multiple, like every application that I've personally received, I was able to clearly, they all look different, but I was still able to clearly find the evidence and clearly find what I need, and they all look different. So as long as everything is labeled clearly, we know where we're going. If you send us large documents that you highlight what we're looking for as the evidence, because I know a lot of times it makes sense to you, but we're reviewing and we don't know the programs of study. And so it's important that you point us to exactly what we should be, what we should be looking for. And so, yeah, multiple applications means, yes, for each of your program of study. So we have, some people who have planned to submit every single program of study that they have at the college. And if you're going to be doing that, if you're going to have 5 to 25 applications, or programs of study submitted, that's what we mean by multiple applications. We will be submitting the budget prior to the deadline. Yeah, we'll definitely work with you. What we are finding, and I know that this may not be the case for every single program of study application. You all are doing the work ahead of time to make sure that the quality components are met. So most of the time they are met. It's just the evidence is maybe not necessarily aligning, or you haven't sent in the proper evidence to demonstrate that you meet that component. And so our feedback is just, hey, can you show us how this meets this component? And so we don't know, there may be some programs of study that are not approved, but we will definitely work with you to help to develop the program of study. If we're bumping up against the FY23 deadline and you're planning to expend funds. So if possible, send them in early. If you're not able to, we'll work with you and we'll, adjust as needed if for whatever reason your program of study is not approved. But we don't necessarily anticipate that, being a problem. And yes, if you have submitted applications, you will be receiving feedback soon. To be honest, we were not anticipating having applications so soon, but we welcome them. And so, yeah, we just have to get our process established, and we will be reaching out to give everyone approval. And we know that that's going to help to inform your future approval submissions. So, yes.
We do have a hand up. The 9772, please.
Yeah, this is me,
unmute.
Is that Nancy? Hi, Nancy.
Hi, and thanks, Amy. Just to be clear, let's say Elgin submitted by the deadline couple of program of studies, and we did not hear a feedback by July 22. Can we use the funds for those programs that we haven't heard a feedback yet?
I think our goal is to give you at least whether or not they're tentatively approved, right, Janelle? Some may require revisions, but what we're working on, like Janelle said, we didn't anticipate receiving so many early on, and then we were kind of looking at what we had and trying to decide the best way to evaluate them. So you should be receiving with your a sheet similar to what you get for your Perkins grant that says whether or not it's approved as submitted, tentatively approved or not approved, and then with the appropriate feedback that if you need to make revisions or just general feedback that didn't affect your approval, but we'd like to see it in future applications. Did I get that right, Janelle?
So we would be able to get an answer before July, before we start expanding the money, right?
That is certainly our hope.
That is our hope, yes.
Yeah, we've set our application deadline for June 1st. And so we hope to be able to get them done. Again, I mean, we're anticipating we may have a lot, of applications, coming in at that time, but I will say we have had several, now. So as you get them submitted, as you get them completed, just please submit them to us. But yes, we do anticipate having an answer before.
Yeah, thank you both so much. Of course, our intention is to submit them as early as possible, but we're trying to work on a program of study, and we're trying to work with our faculty as well. So we're anticipating that some of them will by the deadline, and that's why I'm concerned. Can we start expending money if we did not hear a tentative approval by that time?
Our hope is just to let you know whether or not, it's been approved before FY23 starts.
Thank you.
Janelle, did we address Teresa's question about?
Yeah, I answered it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
I had a question, Janelle.
Okay.
It's Anna from Rock Valley. I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand on this view that I'm in. So I think I'd asked you this before, but just in case anybody else is having the same question, I figured I would go ahead and ask it again. If we had something that was listed on our program of study approval inventory, and we have not heard from that program that they're planning to submit a program of study, does that mean that we can just not expect funding for that program until they do submit an approved program of study?
So did they utilize funding the last 2 years? Or did you only list them on the inventory for the FY21 application?
I believe in the case I'm thinking of, they were only listed on the inventory and they just hadn't quite gotten off the ground in the same way we'd expected.
Yeah, okay, so I would say, okay, so I know initially we did state that if you listed programs of study on the inventory for the FY20 application, that we were going to be anticipating an application. However, if you're not using funds, then it will be acceptable, we won't expect an application or an approval form, as long as you're not using funds. So that they would still have 2 years to begin to use funds, because if they have not over the last 2 years. And so I know, like I said, our initial the process was new for everyone with the 4-year application and the program of study inventory. And I know that was a feedback that a lot of people received for the FY20 application, was that all the programs listed on your inventory will be, we would expect it. But if that, if you have not developed those programs, you're not expending funds, then you can disregard, you don't have to submit those programs of study for approval. Only
Okay.
I was gonna say only the programs that you've been using funds for the last 2 years and expect to use funds for in FY23.
Okay, and then piggybacking on that, because it sounded like someone in the chat was having the same question. Say we have a program that used funding in FY21 or FY22, but they're swamped, and we did talk about this, Janelle, I did get an answer from you, but I know someone else has the same question. If they're swamped with program review or staff or turnover or something like that, and they're like, I just can't get this done by that deadline. You had previously said, and just if you wouldn't mind confirming, that it's okay if they submit it after the June 1st, 22 deadline, as long as they understand that they cannot be funded in FY23 or however long it takes for them to submit that program of study. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for clarifying those. You
are welcome. I think I was answering. So Bianca asked that if the revisions also needed to be submitted prior to June 1st, and no. So I know the couple that I've given feedback to, I didn't even put a date, but we will let you know. We'll the same way that we asked a couple weeks to let us approve or review your applications. We'll give you time to get your revisions in. So probably like a week or two, but we'll definitely be sure to include that in your feedback.
Hey, Janelle, I have a question, just clarifying the last person's comments as well. In the chat, Teresa Palenti asked about the culinary. So she said, say we have not used Perkins funds for culinary since 7/1/20 and aren't planning to apply for that program of study by 6/30/22, I assume 6/1/22. But then receive a request to use Perkins funds for culinary in FY22. So I'm thinking, based on what I've heard you say, that would be okay to use those as long as that gets submitted within 2 years?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you have 2 years to use funds and develop a program.
Since 20.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, thank you. As always, you and some of you we recognize are not necessarily Perkins administrators, but just feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about our program of study approval process. we are happy to help guide you all through this process. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to receiving more applications.
Thank you very much, ICCB. Thank you for being here. And again, that would be post-secondary Perkins questions should go to ICCB. If you are joining us and you represent the secondary system, ISBE would be happy to take those questions. Is that correct, Janelle? You don't want yet? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Just a couple footnotes as we have just a couple minutes left. Just wanted to follow up with you. Please be posting on social media or add or look at our social media posts. Those are all of our hashtags and links. And in addition, we all want to be seeing our exhibitor center, so that is there on the app. So have a great day, and we will be back at 3:30 as our last breakout session for today. And then we start bright and early tomorrow morning with a general session at 8 a.m. So hope you're all enjoying the forum, and we look forward to seeing you this afternoon. And traditionally, this would be our ice cream break. So go get yourself some ice cream because we're at the forum, and those of you who didn't want ice cream, you don't have to have it this year at all. So all good. Thank you guys for a great session and a great presentation, and we'll see you at the next session and tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.